So some of us were around in 1985, and we might remember the Live Aid concert. Anyone watched that? Oh, well, it was more than the first service. Fantastic. Well done. That's good. So you might know the answer to this question. I know that Richard Airy was there. He told me before he was in the first service, and Richard was a technician with Telstra, and he said we were sort of watching the broadcast, and all of a sudden this thing came on, and it played all night. And usually back then the ABC didn't play all night; it switched off at midnight. You remember? But they just let it go, kept it going, and I said, "Well, thank you, Richard, because I was up all night watching that. It was fantastic." So the Live Aid concert in 1985. It's one of those events that sticks in our cultural psyche. And that's because it brought millions of people together around a common cause. And that was, of course, raising funds to address famine in Africa. And it was huge. It was broadcast to 150 different nations. And it's estimated that 1.9 billion viewers watched it around the world. And it was a who's who of performers who were on stage both at Wembley Stadium in London and also in Philadelphia in the USA, simulcast. So U2 were there, Sting was there, Dire Straits, Queen, Elton John, The Who, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, when they were still Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, The Beach Boys, Santana, Madonna, Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan. I mean, everyone had a favourite there. There's a fruit salad of tastes there, isn't there? But you know, there was one act that was invited who didn't nearly make it. Anyone want to try and have a guess who that might be? Michael Jackson? No, that's not who it was. That's good. Good try. This person has probably had, in our generation, well, certainly my generation, had a huge influence on style and taste when it comes to musical culture. And artistic style and that sort of thing. It's David Bowie. David Bowie, invited, but initially turned down the invitation. He turned down the invitation for two reasons. At first, he didn't actually realise how significant this event was. He said, Bob Geldof? And I don't think so. But the other reason was he was supposed to sing a simulcast with Mick Jagger, who would be in Philadelphia, and David Bowie on stage at Wembley, and they were going to sing a duet together. But, I could blame Richard for this maybe, but they couldn't get the simulcast to match up. There was a delay between the two and the satellite signal and all those sorts of things. Maybe that's not a problem these days, but it certainly was then. And he just said, look, this is going to be a mess. I'd rather not do it. But, eventually he came around. And he sang his song, Heroes. And it was one of the most poignant moments in the concert. You know that line, we could be heroes just for one day. And here was these millions of people, billions, watching around the world, wanting to be heroes for the people suffering in Africa. It was a poignant moment. But he nearly didn't make it. And I wonder if you have ever received an invitation to something and turned it down only to regret it later. Ever had that experience? In today's passage in Luke, Jesus tells us a parable about an invitation to a great banquet. And this parable is significant because the host in the story represents God, and the banquet symbolises his kingdom. And so this parable is all about the greatest invitation that's ever been made to humankind. The greatest invitation that's ever been made to humankind. And it starts with these words. Jesus is speaking. He says, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who'd been invited, come now, for everything is ready. Now, in the ancient world, as Jesus was telling this story, a banquet wasn't just a meal. It was a big deal. It was an expression of joy. It was an expression of the host's abundance. It was an expression of them wanting to belong together. And the host would send out two invitations. The first was a kind of a save the date invitation, and the second invitation came when everything was ready. And here, Jesus is using this imagery to teach these people and us about the nature of God's kingdom. God has extended an open invitation for people to enter his kingdom and to participate in a banquet of joy, fulfillment, truth, safety, love, and peace with him forever. Now, as we read through the Old Testament, what we're reading there is God's first invitation. His first invitation. It's a save the date invitation. As we look through the Old Testament, we see, for example, in Genesis 12, he invited Abraham. He said, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. This is the first invitation. All peoples on earth will be blessed through Abraham. Then through Moses, he called his people into a covenant relationship. And through the Old Testament prophets, God promised a Messiah who would save not just Israel, but the whole world. And we see that in Isaiah 55. There God says, come all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. So this is the first save the date invitation. And then the New Testament, of course, is when we receive the second invitation. It's God's come now because everything is ready invitation. And of course, the messenger carrying that invitation is Jesus. And Jesus extended this second invitation on many occasions. And one of them is recorded in Matthew 11. It says there in Matthew 11:28, Jesus said there, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. That's just an example. But Jesus made that invitation repeatedly throughout the Gospels. And then in the final chapter of the Bible, in Revelation 22:17, it says, the Spirit and the bride say, come. And let the one who hears say, come. Let the one who's thirsty come. Let the one who wishes take the free gift of the water of life. So from beginning to end, God's message is consistent. And his message is consistently that his kingdom is open to all. And the time to respond to that invitation is now. Now's the time. It's prepared. It's ready. Now's the time to respond. God's prepared everything. And now he invites us to come into his eternal banquet. And he doesn't ask us to bring anything to this table. It's not like a Baptist bring in and share a plate meal that we have after church on occasion. He says, everything is prepared. It's ready for you. Come now. And so this Old Testament, it's the first invitation. Save the date. God's preparing his people for what's to come. And the New Testament is the second invitation. And he's saying, everything's ready. Come now. Now's the time to accept this invitation. And of course, this invitation isn't just a call, a one-time invitation to respond to the call to salvation. It's an invitation that we can accept every single day. Because every single day, God's inviting us to experience his joy. He's inviting us to grow in our faith. He's inviting us to participate in his mission in the world. And he extends that invitation to us every day, every single day. And so I wonder if you're responding to those invitations daily. Or maybe you're here today or watching online and you're thinking, well, God doesn't want you at his banquet. And you know that you feel this way if you're telling yourself things like, I don't have it all together yet. Or simply, God wouldn't want me. He knows what I've done. He wouldn't want me. So if you're telling yourself those things, I want you to know that today that's complete nonsense. And I hope you can see that in this parable today. God's invitation is open to everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, and no matter what has been done to you, God's invitation is open to you. At the very first Christmas, the angels who visited the shepherds, they said this in Luke 2:10-11. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. His invitation is for everyone. You don't need to clean up your act before accepting God's invitation. Just come as you are. And so ask yourself today, friends, are you responding to this invitation, to God's invitation? Are you responding to his invitation to salvation? Are you responding to his invitations every day to participate in the work of his kingdom? Don't believe the nonsense that you're not worthy of this invitation. This is an open invitation, and you can say yes to Jesus at any moment, even right now, and he will not turn you away. But we're human, aren't we? And we make excuses. And Jesus points out a number of excuses here that people commonly make, that they might want to reject this invitation, so they make excuses. And each of the invited guests here made an excuse. He says in verses 18 to 20, they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, I have just brought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me. Another said, I have just brought 5 yoke of oxen. I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me. And still another said, I just got married, so I can't come. And now, on the surface, these excuses might sound reasonable. They might seem reasonable. But Jesus included them here for a reason, so let's dig into what they mean. The first guy says, I can't come now because I've bought a plot of land. I must go and see it. Now, this is all about our material possessions. This guy was prioritising his investments over this invitation into the kingdom. Investment or invitation? That's the choice that this guy was making. And of course, owning land and property and investments, that's not wrong. But allowing them to take priority over the Lord certainly is. And so Jesus warned us about this. In Matthew 6, he said this, do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth, but store up for yourselves treasure in heaven. So that's the first excuse. The first guy, I bought a piece of land, is a materialism excuse. Is materialism getting in the way of you accepting this invitation? The next guy's excuse reveals a preoccupation with work. Now, as Australians, I can't understand how anyone could be preoccupied with work, but this guy was. In Luke 14, he says, I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. This guy cannot wait to try out the tools of his trade. He's a farmer. He's just bought some oxen. It's like saying, I've just bought a new combine harvester and I need to go and see it. I need to go and check it out. It's got GPS on it. Or something like that. This guy's a workaholic who'd rather check out his farming equipment than go to a party. He's impatient and he's impulsive. His priorities are out of whack. And we can sometimes be distracted by our work, can't we? And our impatience. These things can distract us from what really matters. The Apostle Paul warned us about this in 1 Timothy 6. He says, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. There's a bit of irony to this guy's story, actually, because these oxen were supposed to help him with his farming and to bring in an abundance of provision that he could provide for his own family and sell whatever's left over. So he was trying to farm for abundance by using this tool, but in his obsession with the tool, he missed the feast that was being laid out before him by this invitation. And so I wonder if there's anywhere in your life where you're allowing impatience, impulsiveness, or workaholism to distract you from truly following the Lord. Or maybe you're in a position where you're working so hard to try and make things happen, and the Lord's just saying to you, just wait. Just wait, I've got this. And then there's the third guy's excuse. He said, I've married a wife. Sounds reasonable to me. Now, relationships, of course, are important to all of us, aren't they? But the telling question for this guy is, why wouldn't you invite her to the banquet as well? He doesn't even come up with that idea. What's going on here? And this excuse shows us that some relationships can draw us away from the Lord. I wonder if you have any relationships like that. It might not be a bad relationship. It could even be a good one. But prioritising any relationship over the Lord is a rejection of his invitation. Jesus said in Matthew 10, "Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." Now, if you're from a Western culture, you're probably not much bothered by that. But for those of us here who come from an Eastern and collectivist culture, your family obligations hold significant weight, don't they? And this excuse might resonate quite deeply with you. It's a huge question. How do I honour my family and my parents in particular, but still put Jesus first? And it's worth some time thinking that through. The first thing to note here is that God is the source of love and relationships. He's the source of love and the source of all relationships. So it's not saying that we should not value those relationships. But when pleasing people, even our parents, when this takes precedence over pleasing God, then our priorities are out of whack. And you know, the Bible encourages us to honour both our family, our parents, and God. In fact, honour your father and mother is one of the 10 commandments. So we are to honour our parents. Perhaps in your culture, when family decisions might be prioritised in the group over individual decisions, then maybe it's time for a gentle private conversation. You could express your faith and the implications it has for your life, but still affirm your commitment to your family. It is a challenging space, and to be honest, I'm not in that space and I struggle to understand it. But with prayer and grace, I believe the Lord can give you wisdom. And I want to let you know that there are people in our church who are older in the faith and older on their journey, and perhaps they have some experience that you can plug into, and then they might share your culture and have experience around how to handle that situation with your family. I encourage you to plug into people like that. But you know, regardless of our cultural heritage, at times we all offer God all kinds of excuses, don't we? All kinds of excuses. And here's the thing, most excuses really aren't legitimate. They're not good reasons, they're just our desires. Excuses reveal what we value the most. And as we read through this parable, we can see that the guests here, they simply weren't that busy. There's no reason why they couldn't go to the banquet. But like all people, and like these people in the parable, we prioritise what we think is important. And these guys didn't consider this invitation to be all that important. And that is the heart of the issue here. Sometimes our priorities are misplaced. And so let me ask you, what's holding you back from fully saying yes to God's plans? Is it your career? Is it your possessions? Is it your relationships? Are any of these in the way of the Lord's purposes being worked out in your life? I want to encourage you this morning, don't let excuses rob you of what God has for your life. He has laid out an abundant banquet. If only we could trust him for that. Don't let your excuses hold you back from all of what God has for you. Now, what happens next in this parable is totally unexpected. Now, most of us here, if we held a party and we put up a Facebook invitation, invited our friends only or whatever we do, or mailed an invitation, and every single one of those came back and said, yeah, nah, like a typical Australian response, yeah, nah. I don't know about you, but I know what I would do. I'd take everything back to the store and get a refund. I'd cancel the event and I'd say to the world, get lost. You know, because my ego would be bruised. I'd be thinking, you want to flick me off? Fine, I'll flick you off. You know, I shouldn't say that because I'm a pastor, but I'm human as well, right? But it's the reality, isn't it? We would just flick people off. But of course, the point here, and I'm overemphasising that, the point here is that God is not like that, is he? God is just not like that. The king in this parable takes a different approach. He opens the doors to the streets and the lanes, and he invites the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame, people that society has written off. And he doesn't stop there. He sends his servant out to the highways and to the hedges, and he tells them, compel them to come in. And so this isn't just a feast. It's a radical statement of God's grace. This king, he's been snubbed, he's been rejected, and instead of scaling back, he expands his invitation. And isn't that just like our Saviour? Our Lord's love for the world, it's not limited like a bruised ego. He's not limited by a punitive response to rejection. Instead of retreating, he broadens the invitation. And the groups that are invited here, they teach us a few things. He invites the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. This group represents those who are physically, socially, and spiritually broken. And in the ancient world, those people were readily excluded from all of social life, particularly religious life. But Jesus flips the script here and he says, these are the people I came for. And guess what? We're actually all in that category, aren't we? Spiritually speaking, we're all blind, we're all crippled, we're all poor, spiritually speaking, until we meet Jesus. And so there's that group. And then the other group are those who are in the highways and the hedges. In other words, the homeless people. All those who don't have a home. They're living on the highways and under hedges. The master tells his servant, go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. And this expands the invitation beyond the city, beyond the familiar, to the outsiders, to the Gentiles. It reflects God's heart for all nations seen throughout Scripture. And so here's the challenge for us. Are we reaching the people that God has placed in our lives? The ones who might feel excluded. Because Jesus' parable reminds us that evangelism isn't about waiting for people to come to us. He sent his servant out and said, compel them to come in. It's about us going out to the world to compel people to say yes to Jesus. So think about where you spend your week, your workplace, your gym, the university, your coffee shop. That's your mission field. You don't need a pulpit. You don't necessarily need a passport unless you're going to live in Mozambique. But you don't need a passport. You're on mission here, today, right now. Your mission is to share the love of Christ. And where are you helping your church to serve the poor, the crippled, and the blind and the lame? Are you making these ones welcome here at Riverton? Is our church a reflection of God's open invitation? Is everyone welcome here, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from? Friends, this parable is obviously not just about a banquet. It's about the house of our Father and his heart for people. He has a heart that longs for his house to be full. And the only way that happens is through Jesus Christ. Jesus is the ultimate gift, the one who makes a way for all of us to come to the table. And so as we close, there's a couple of things I want to give you to take away. If your mind's wandered off, tune back in for this. Because everyone is invited into God's kingdom. No matter who you are, no matter what you've done, Jesus invites you into his kingdom. And there is no excuse good enough to reject that invitation. Why would you? He's laying out a banquet before us. Why would we reject that? But here's the sobering thing about this parable. Once the master has extended the invitation to everyone and he's filled his house with everyone and he's invited everyone in, once that's done, he shuts the door. He shuts the door so that those excuse makers couldn't change their mind and come in. So friends, I want you to see this invitation to God's kingdom as a gift. It's a gift, and the invitation is for now. It's for now. Now is the time. The banquet's ready. Now is the time to say yes to this invitation, because you don't know when the door of this life is going to close on you. Don't turn down this gift. Accept Jesus' invitation while you can. That's the first thing I want you to see. Now is the time to accept this invitation. One day the door will close. The second thing is this. If you're a follower of Jesus today, if you call yourself a Christian, don't go through this life accepting second best. There's nothing wrong with owning property. There's nothing wrong with closely examining your investments. There's nothing wrong with an evening or two with your spouse. But are these good things keeping you from what's best? Are these good things holding you back from pursuing God things, the God things in your life? You see, these excuse makers, they were seen as successful people in the eyes of their friends and their family. But in Jesus' eyes, they were complete failures. The door was closed on them. And if you've had success in your life, wonderful. God bless you. But don't fail at what's most important. God extends an invitation for you to participate in his kingdom every day. Stop making excuses for what you know God is calling you to do. Step out. Say yes to him today. Accept the gift of Jesus' invitation.